Thanks to CuriosityStream and Nebula for sponsoring this video. The world's climate is changing because of the actions of humanity, and this is having a few knock-on effects. Among other things, it's disrupting the way humans live their lives and making them poorer. It's estimated that if climate change continues unabated, it will have reduced global GDP in the year 2100 by 37%. The cost of climate change in 2021 alone has been estimated at $170 billion. And those people who have contributed the least to this problem, those living in the global south and the youth of today, are those who are bearing the brunt of it. So you, and your descendants, are being made poorer, not through your actions, but through the actions of others. Doesn't sound very fair. And what do we do when things don't sound fair? We ask for justice.
Did someone say justice?
Climate change is such a huge problem that no one tool exists that's powerful enough to solve it on its own. There is no silver bullet to stop climate change. But what there is silver buckshot. Throw everything at the problem, every tool at our disposal in an effort to solve it. And as this is a problem that affects humans, one of the tools at our disposal is the framework that we've communally agreed on to settle grievances. In other words, the law. And for the past several decades, people have been doing this. Litigation has been leveled at fossil fuel companies, car manufacturers, energy suppliers, governments, and many more. Over 1,000 climate-related lawsuits have been filed in the past 6 years alone, the majority of which are, unsurprisingly, in the lawsuit capital of the world, the United States of America. But while there have been many, many lawsuits, few have been successful, which is kind of odd, because we know what causes climate change, the emission of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane. So if an entity, which could be a corporation like Exxon, or a government like the government of Australia, is known to be responsible for a chunk of emissions, then we can say that they have changed the climate, and thus are responsible for the damage caused. If only it were that simple. Unfortunately though, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't have the knowledge to explain to you quite why it's not that simple. But I do just so happen to have YouTube's lawyer on speed dial.
I regret to inform you that to date, environmental lawsuits have had very little success in preventing climate change or redressing the changes to the planet that have already occurred. And there are some very good reasons for that. In the US legal system, and really most of the legal systems that follow in the English tradition, there are a number of requirements that you have to meet before you're able to file a lawsuit. And these types of environmental lawsuits are incredibly difficult to actually prosecute or move forward. First, generally a plaintiff, to be able to sue someone, has to show injury in fact. And the injury in fact requirement requires that what the harm that you have suffered is concrete and particularized, and it's not conjectural or hypothetical. So in other words, even if there are going to be real concrete harms in the future, you have to show that you have suffered them in the present or in the past. On top of that, the injury that the plaintiff has suffered needs to be actually redressable by the court. In other words, the court needs to be able to solve your problem. And climate change that affects the entire world is not necessarily the type of thing that any single court can solve or provide damages for. And then perhaps the most important requirement generally to being able to sue someone or something is that the plaintiff has to show a causal connection between the injury and the conduct complained of. In other words, it has to be fairly traceable to the defendant's particular actions. And when it comes to climate change or the environment, this is particularly difficult. Imagine you have a homeowner who suffers damages related to a fire. If you can prove that someone started the fire by lighting a match and setting everything on fire, that's probably not hard to prove in terms of the causal connection. Now imagine you have two people, both with matches, who set a fire at exactly the same time. That fire combines into one fire and then it burns down someone's house. Well, now that's a little bit harder. But imagine still that you have 1,000 different people, all with matches, setting a fire at the same time. showing that your damages are related to any one particular person might not be impossible, but now it's getting more dangerous. Then on top of it, imagine you have a situation where I set up a Rube Goldberg machine that at the end of it lights a match and starts the fire. Now, I don't actually start the marble that sets the whole thing in motion, but somebody else does. Now, who's at fault? Is it the person that built the Rube Goldberg machine, or is it the person that actually set it in motion? Every time you get to a level of abstraction, it gets harder and harder to be able to show a causal connection. Now, imagine in the climate change context when you're dealing with, say, carbon dioxide. A metric ton of carbon dioxide on its own probably has zero effect. But when you add thousands, if not millions of polluters all adding carbon dioxide or methane, well, together that might create some of the things that we're talking about, but maybe not alone. So how do you get damages from one particular person who might be polluting when there's thousands and thousands of other people who have to contribute in order for that to make a difference? It's a really, really thorny question when it comes to suing someone and trying to stop it.
The problem with many lawsuits to date is that they've focused on emissions to date, and thus the impact that corporations and governments have already had on the climate. But here's the thing. Emissions are still ongoing and, unfortunately, are going to continue into the near future at the very least. But that means there's a whole different possible category of lawsuit. Instead of focusing on the past, focusing on holding corporations and governments responsible for future changes to the climate. A landmark ruling took place in 2015 in the Netherlands, when a court ordered the Dutch government to cut its greenhouse gas emissions, as a failure to do so would contribute to a climate that would pose a, quote, serious degree of danger to Dutch citizens, a ruling that was later upheld by the Dutch Supreme Court. To quote Joanna Setzer, an expert in climate litigation at the Grantham Institute, for the first time a court had recognised that a government violates its duty of care for citizens if it doesn't do enough to curb emissions. This meant a lot from a legal point of view. And since that case, strengthened by the precedent and by the Paris Agreement and the IPCC's 5th and now 6th assessment reports, more and more courts are ruling in favour of climate-based plaintiffs. And as we strengthen our understanding of both the causes of and effects of climate change, the type of litigation brought to court is broadening. Corporations are increasingly finding themselves targeted by lawsuits that aren't interested in gross carbon emissions, but things like greenwashing, corporations overselling the actions they're taking to limit their environmental impact, or just outright deception. Governments are also being targeted in different, more precise ways, such as seeking to remove specific subsidies for the fossil fuel industry, or challenging permits being granted for fossil fuel extraction, or for the expansion of airports. Though, yeah, that's a pretty sore point for me in the Bristol area right now. We can be pretty confident that these strategic lawsuits, and their mirror image, those filed by individuals or corporations seeking to prevent climate-based action, will only get more common in the next few years.
Honestly, in terms of maximizing the probability of success for using the legal system, your best bet is probably changing the law. The things that I've talked about are bedrock principles of litigation, and I don't think those things are going to change anytime soon. But you can always write a law that allows people to file suit, that changes some of those requirements. The things that I've been talking about are sort of the default positions of the legal system. They exist when there isn't a contrary law. But that's the thing, laws can be changed. And when you pass a law and enact a statute, well, that changes the default position of the legal system. And it would probably be pretty easy for various governments to institute laws that would allow someone to have standing to file these kinds of lawsuits. Governments could also give the power to regulatory agencies to file suit on behalf of the government. So there are certainly lots of ways for the default position of the legal system to change, but at the moment, given the default rules, it would be very, very difficult. So, call your congressperson.
This is, of course, a theme in climate change. Generally speaking, entire systems, not just the details in them, need to change, from how we heat our homes to how international trade is done. But, especially with the Dutch 2015 case providing a legal precedent, I am, and some environmental lawyers are, growing in confidence that more legal successes lie in the near future. Climate litigation will increasingly form part of the silver buckshot used to try and prevent catastrophic climate change this century. And if the past few years are anything to go by, it's going to be an effective tool. And yes, winning a lawsuit doesn't mean that emissions will fall. You have to enforce the ruling. And yes, the whole system could frankly do with an overhaul. But all the same, I never thought I'd say this, I think I'm starting to like lawyers.
Thank you.
I was very lucky to have Devin collaborate with me on this project. If you'd like to see more from him, check out his legal videos on YouTube, or if you'd rather watch his content without any ads, including some additional exclusive videos, such as his recent episode on rights you absolutely should be using as an American, then check out his channel on Nebula. As a matter of fact, you could check out exclusive videos from me on Nebula as well, such as my recent video on how Norway became the electric vehicle capital of the world. Nebula, as you've probably heard by now, is the streaming service owned and operated by a huge team of educational YouTubers, including me. Here we upload the videos that we upload to YouTube, but with extra content and without any ads at all. No pre-roll ads, no ads in the videos themselves. It's the thoughtful, educational part of YouTube with creators like Ali Abdaal, Our Changing Climate, and Midlife Crisis, but better. There's no ads, you can download videos and watch them offline, and by watching a creator, you directly financially support them and help them make more content. You can get access by signing up with our partners CuriosityStream, who curate the finest library of documentaries on the internet. They have thousands of professionally produced titles, such as Climate for a Few Degrees Less, about the struggle to prevent global warming reaching catastrophic levels, available at your fingertips. By signing up at curiositystream.com/Simon Clark, you get access to all of this, extra content from your favorite indie creators on Nebula, and a 26% discount. It works out at just $14.79 for an entire year, or just over $1 a month. For the version of YouTube you already watch, but better, and access to thousands of brain-improving documentaries. That's curiositystream.com/Simon Clark, with thanks to CuriosityStream and Nebula for sponsoring this video. Thank you so much for watching this video, and of course, thank you so much to Devin from Legal Eagle for collaborating with me on this. I've been watching Devin's videos for years. If you haven't checked him out before, please do watch his videos. They're great. This was a dream collab for me. If you'd like to watch something next, here's one of Devin's videos, here's one of mine. You can sign up for CuriosityStream down here, and if you aren't already, please do subscribe to my channel. There's a button just down there. If you enjoyed the video, please do pop it a like. And that just leaves me to say, thank you again for watching. I'll see you in the next one.